are on the precipice of advancing to the second round against the LA Kings, and we are about to break it down on a very special crossover edition of Locked On Oilers and Locked On Kings.
You are Locked On Oilers, your daily podcast on the Edmonton Oilers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, Kings and Oilers fans. Welcome to this special crossover edition of Locked On LA Kings and Locked On Oilers, both parts of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Eddie Garcia, your host of Locked On LA Kings, and he is Nick Zararis, host of Locked On Oilers, and we are here to talk about what we've seen so far between the Los Angeles Kings and Edmonton Oilers in their first round playoff matchup in the Stanley Cup playoffs. Today's episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go, the mobile hit twist on classic Monopoly. Join your friends and download Monopoly Go, now free in the App Store or Google Play. Hey, Nick, it's good to talk to you again as the LA Kings and Edmonton Oilers have played their first 4 games of the playoff series so far. I'm sure there have been some things that you expected, some things that were surprises. We're going to get into it all here in just a second, but thanks for doing this again. Always good to have you on the show.
Always good to talk puck. This is the best time of year as a hockey fan. You get at least 6 hours of high quality hockey every night, if not more.
Well, unfortunately for me and Kings fans, the Oilers are holding a 3-1 lead as we get ready for this crucial Game 5 in Edmonton. Obviously a must-win for the Kings and a chance for the Oilers to advance into the second round. Now, the Kings obviously looking to avoid being eliminated for a third year in a row by the Edmonton Oilers, so this might sting even a little bit more for the Kings if it does go the way things are looking like it might go. But you never know. We'll talk more about that in a little bit. But the Oilers won Game 1, 7-4. Connor McDavid goes crazy, 5 assists. Zach Hyman a hat trick. A great way to start for the Oilers. Game 2, the Kings bounce back, winning in Edmonton, 5-4 in overtime. Adrian Kempe, a couple of goals. Anze Kopitar scores the game winner in sudden death. Then the series shifts to LA. Oilers win Game 3, 6-1. It really was decided in the first period. 3 goals by the Oilers, 3-0, and it was kind of over after that. And then Game 4, the last game, Oilers were boosted by goalie Stuart Skinner, 33-save shutout. The Kings played their game they wanted to play, and unfortunately for them, it wasn't enough. 1-0, the final score, and that's where we are. Again, Edmonton leading in the series, 3-1. So let's get your thoughts on what we've seen so far through these first 4 games. Generally speaking, how has the series gone? And what have you thought about the series so far?
I've felt that the Kings have played really well when the game's been 5-on-5, when they have been able to get into a nice rhythm where not a lot of stoppages. They've been able to consistently force the Oilers to make plays at the blue line as they're entering the zone. And when the Kings have found success in this series, it's generally been pressuring the Oilers right as they enter the zone, because that's generally when they're the most sensitive, when they're still trying to establish their zone entry and set up how they want to be positioned in the offensive zone. The Drew Doughty goal in Game 2 comes to mind, where he jumped a pass at the blue line and was able to spring himself for a scoring chance, and he put it in the net. But when the series is gone to special teams, and that's been the deciding factor in this series, the goal differential on special teams is 8-0. At 5-on-5, this is a close series. It's 10-8 on goals. At 5-on-5, on special teams, it's 8-0. When the special teams disparity is that wide, and some of that is just bad luck. The Kings are not a 0% power play team. They are not. They have enough talent where they're going to be able to be competitive most nights, but being the way the game is unfolding, the way the series is unfolding, how each game is played out within the series, it feels like the Kings are doing a reasonable enough job. They're hanging around in these games. And then it's a little mistake that the Oilers are able to pounce on. And whether it's drawing a penalty or scoring, that's really hard to overcome. And it's not that there's a huge talent gap between these two teams. You could make an argument the Kings are a deeper lineup when you go 1-12 and then 1-6 on the back end. It's that the Oilers' best players have been able to take advantage of their opportunities at 5-on-4. And that's really what swung the series.
To me, it kind of feels like the 2022 playoff matchup, the first year of the 3 meetings. If you remember, the Oilers won some of the earlier games, pretty lopsided scores. The Kings were able to win the closer scores, and then things got a little bit tighter as the series went along. Edmonton ended up winning in 7. Games 1 and 3 in this series, I mean, I thought the Oilers were clearly the better team. Game 2, LA playing a lot closer, pulling out the close win in overtime. And then game 4, if things go the way it looks like they might go, certainly the Kings will look back on that game as a huge missed opportunity. The difference between a 3-1 and a 2-2 series obviously is enormous. I thought the Kings outskated the Oilers. They had more shots, more hits, but they just could not solve Stuart Skinner in that game number 4. So I know the Oilers, the 2 games that they've won pretty much convincingly. But to me, it almost feels like it should be a 2-2 series. That 4th game was a game the Kings had to have. And as you mentioned, I agree with everything you said. When it's a 5-on-5 game, it's a pretty even series. The special teams have been the story of this one, and I'll get into that more with some of the stats that I was going to mention a little bit later. But it doesn't, to me, and maybe I'm being a Kings fan and seeing what I want to see, but it doesn't feel like a 3-1 series, because 3-1 to me, obviously that's on the edge of it being over in 5. That's a quick series, but it feels like it should be 2-2. But that game 4, the Oilers obviously found a way to win, and I'll give Stuart Skinner all the credit in the world for getting that first postseason shutout for him. Is there anything that has surprised you so far through the series?
I didn't realize how good individually some of the guys on the Kings were. Like, you go and look at the stat sheet, and you had mentioned Trevor Moore when we did the preview show last week. He's really jumped out to me. I've long been a fan of Kevin Fiala's game. He's very noticeable. And I think that the thing that surprised me most is the Kings look all really good individually, but when you try and sync it up, they haven't really been able to get pucks to dangerous areas of the ice. They've done a decent job cycling, in particular in game 4. They really pinned the Oilers in their own zone for extended periods of time. They forced the Oilers to play defense. And that's the formula in today's NHL to beating these high-powered offenses. If you force McDavid, you force Draisaitl to play defense, they're not going to be able to score on you. In fact, you would argue they are weaker defensively, and that's going to give you more opportunities. If game 4 plays out that way, that's the type of game the Kings are situated talent-wise to win. They are the bigger, they're the stronger, they're the more physical team. And you would think a 1-0 game would skew in the Kings' favor, kind of like what we talked about on the preview episode, where if the Kings are going to win in games in this series, you're going to need that overtime win. You're going to need your goalie to steal you one. Somehow the Oilers, who they couldn't buy a save in game 1 or 2 from Skinner, they got the first goalie game in this series. I was also very surprised to see you guys go with Rittich because I didn't feel like it was Cam Talbot's fault, in all honesty. And it's hard in these playoff series because you got to ride the hot hand and you got to sometimes make a change just for the sake of change to try and kickstart your team. But I didn't feel like it was Cam Talbot's fault the Kings were losing these games.
I'll agree with you, and we'll get into that more when we talk about some of the players, key players that have and haven't performed here in just a minute. But I think maybe Stuart Skinner certainly was a surprise for me in game 4, getting that shutout. I think he's kind of like the Kings goaltenders in that I think that LA can have success with those goalies, but not necessarily because of them. I think the same thing is for the Oilers. They can win with Stuart Skinner, but it's not going to be necessarily because he's leading the way. But he certainly had his moment in game number 4. I've been really impressed with the Oilers' penalty kill. I didn't realize it was so good. Now, I'm certainly going to give the Kings some criticism for not being able to do anything with their power play, but I do think it's fair to say that the Oilers' penalty kill is certainly responsible for a big part of that. They're very aggressive. They're really pushing the Kings along the edges, as you mentioned, talking about getting into the area, the good scoring areas. It's not happening on the power play for the Kings. They're not getting the puck into that bumper area in the high slot. They're having to settle for shots from the wing or from the point. And so far, that hasn't obviously worked out. So I would say I'm pretty surprised how good the Oilers' penalty kill is. I knew it was okay. I didn't know it was quite this good. So it's been impressive for me. We're going to talk about, oh, by the way, can I just say something real quick? Speaking of penalties, can we admit that was not a penalty on Andreas Englund in game 4 along the boards that gave the Oilers their only power play of the game and they scored on it?
Very fluky. You hate to see games decided like that. That's like, generally speaking, you have to commit at least a misdemeanor to get a penalty in overtime. Effectively, that was overtime. A 0-0 game in the third period. You don't want to see the game decided on a power play, especially in a series where special teams have been this lopsided. The officiating is so inconsistent. It's mind-boggling what they choose to enforce and what they choose to let go.
Yeah, I guess maybe coming off that game 3 where it just got ridiculous in the third period, maybe they were looking to let things go a little bit, go the other way, because it seemed like they were calling everything and it didn't help to calm things down. So I don't know. It is a difficult job sometimes, I guess, to be an official. I'll put it that way. Up next, we will talk about players that have shined and maybe some players that need to step up as this series is not over yet. We'll do that more on this crossover edition of Locked On LA Kings and Locked On Edmonton Oilers.
Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for, and with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back, because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available for U.S. customers. And by our friends over at Gametime. The ticket buying process can be quite the headache. The surprise fees, not getting a good idea of where your seats actually are, or just getting a good deal to begin with. What makes Gametime the best? The priority last minute deals where you can save up to 60% buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, and theater. Flash sales where you can save exclusively on in-app deals on select seats ahead of the game or event. Zone deals where you choose a section and let Gametime pick the seats. All-in pricing that shows the total price upfront with no surprise fees at checkout. Seat view where you get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy the tickets. The lowest price guarantee, or Gametime will match you up to 100%, 110% of the difference. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed.
All right, we continue with our LA Kings Edmonton Oilers crossover special ahead of game number 5 of their first round Stanley Cup playoff series. I'm Eddie Garcia, host of Locked On LA Kings, and he is Nick Zararis, the host of Locked On Oilers. Nick, before we talk about the some of the players that we're looking to watch and talk about who Edmonton is going to look to, we've seen Connor McDavid do his thing. Certainly he was quiet by his standards in game number 4, so it's been a little bit of a mixed bag from him, but he still is who he is, as we thought going into the series. So maybe just talk a little bit, like I said, about anything you want to talk about involving the individual players, guys who have stepped up, guys who have surprised, guys who have not stepped up yet.
So the thing about McDavid that really kind of makes him so unique is the way they use him on the power play, where he moves like a point guard in basketball, where he's constantly bobbing and weaving, trying to pull people towards him. And that's why Zach Hyman gets to tap pucks into open nets, because you have to respect the most dangerous player in the world with the puck on his stick, and it makes so much space for everybody else. It's a really unconventional way to approach your power play, to not run it through the point. That's pretty much non-existent in today's NHL. Some teams do it. The Devils do it with Jack Hughes from time to time. The Wild do it with Kirill Kaprizov, where they'll get him the puck and just have him skate the perimeter of the offensive zone on the man advantage. And then the play develops around him, where someone has to come out towards him to respect him. And then you got the numbers advantage, where if someone comes out of their structure, it becomes 4-on-3 in a more condensed space. And that's a more dangerous scoring opportunity because you're going to be closer to the net. Other than McDavid, Bouchard has been their best defenseman, and he needs to be. The way they are situated and the way they're built, they run a lot of their 5-on-5 play through one of Bouchard, McDavid, or Draisaitl, and the Oilers have done a really nice job in this series of trying to keep at least one of those guys on the ice a good chunk of the time. They've had a lot of success keeping Draisaitl and McDavid away from each other. Leon took a little while to get going. I didn't think he was particularly great in games 1 or 2. The goal differential at 5-on-5 was kind of ugly. That was the line the Kings were having the most success against, was when it was Nugent-Hopkins, Draisaitl, and Foegele. And then going into game 3, they switched it up. up and they put Evander Kane up there. They bumped Fogle down, played him with McLeod and Corey Perry, and they've had a little bit more success there. And then one more person I wanted to shout out. You mentioned the penalty kill. Vinny Desharnais had a really good series for the Oilers, and he's been really impactful on the penalty kill in particular because he's so tall. And you mentioned how the Kings have been really forced to the outside. If a 6'8" guy on skates is pointing his stick out at you, we're talking about 9 feet, 10 feet of wingspan that he's able to use to force you outside of where you want to skate. And the Kings power play is not this bad, and the Kings penalty kill is not this good. I imagine, if everything logic tells us, the Kings should score a power play goal in this game. They should. But being how things have gone, it wouldn't surprise me if they didn't, because hockey in these short samples is very weird.
Well, you mentioned Cam Talbot. I pointed him out in our episode where we previewed the series that he would be a key player. Third different goalie the Oilers have faced in 3 years. And as you mentioned, he got replaced in game number 4 by David Rittich. And I got to believe Rittich will be there in game 5 as well. But I agree with you. I pointed this out on my show. I don't think Cam Talbot was the reason that the Kings lost a couple of these games decidedly. I thought a lot of the goals that were scored were about poor defense. And like as you mentioned, there were tap-in goals on the power play, a guy sitting at the back door. I mean, that's obviously not the goaltender's fault. So I would have actually stuck with Cam Talbot for game 4. Obviously, Coach Jim Hiller decided that there needed to be some kind of a change, some kind of a spark. When we talk about game 5, certainly I'll talk about David Rittich a little bit, but I mean, I know when you see the stats that Talbot's allowed 16 goals in 3 starts, you're like, of course you've got to change that. But I agree with you. I don't think it's the majority of the goals scored are because of bad defense, not bad goaltending. I said that, going forward in this series that I thought the Kings normal, if you want to call them that, the guys they've relied on all year to get offense from, Adrian Kempe, Anze Kopitar, Kevin Fiala, Victor Arvidsson. I thought all those guys would show up. And so far, Kempe certainly has been the guy. He's had success against the Oilers in the past, 3 goals so far to lead the team. Kopitar, I think, has been good as well. I think the top line overall has probably been the Kings' best line with Kempe, Kopitar, and Quentin Byfield. So those guys have showed up so far. And we talked about the goaltending, David Rittich. He certainly had a decent game 4, although he didn't see a lot of action. I expect that's going to change for game number 5. As far as for the Oilers, maybe some guys that going in you thought would need to be heard from that haven't really been heard from yet, or maybe some of the guys you thought were going to be key contributors kind of haven't been there yet. Anything about guys who've kind of underperformed for the Oilers so far?
Like I had mentioned, I thought the Draisaitl, Nugent-Hopkins, and Fogle line, they just weren't clicking, and it wasn't anything in particular. It's the Oilers were doing, the Kings were doing a good job of getting good matchups for them and using last change to their advantage, where if Draisaitl was out there in the defensive zone, they would make a good point of trying to win that faceoff no matter what, even if you have to compromise the rush going the other way, really focusing on forcing them to play defense. I think I would say Ekholm hasn't been as good as he usually is defensively. I think the Kings have done a decent enough job of putting pressure on him and forcing him to make plays a little bit faster than he wants to. Nugent-Hopkins hasn't been great either. He's turned the puck over a lot. The Kings, imposing, physical, strong, and Nuge is a little bit on the slimmer side, a little bit smaller. So there's less space to operate. You got to make your decisions a little bit faster. He hasn't been great, but there's nobody on the Oilers that's like actively dragging them down, which there was a little bit of concern with that when it comes to the 4th line. When it comes to the Cody Ceci, Darnell Nurse pair, they got obliterated in scoring chances against in game 4. It was like 35-6, if I remember correctly, in scoring chances, and then like 25-4 in shots on goal, something egregious like that. So the Oilers have gotten the benefit of some luck. Anytime you win a game 1-0, you're generally speaking going to be the beneficiary of some bounces going your way, but they haven't really had anyone killing them. Sure, you would like Nurse and CC to be a little bit better. You'd like Ekholm to be a little bit better, Nuge to be a little bit better, but no one's really dragging them down.
I think for the Kings, Drew Doughty has been a bit of a mixed bag. He's got a couple of goals, but he also had a really tough first period in game number 3 where he coughed it up, led directly to the first goal, and then he took a penalty, which led to the 3rd goal. Obviously he's on the ice a ton, so he's carrying a heavy load, which he's always done, but he's been a little bit of a mixed bag. Victor Arvidsson was a guy that came on for the Kings late after back surgery and really kind of sparked them, but he has not done much in this series at all. I think if the Kings are going to extend this series, he's going to have to show up in game number 5. No goals for him so far. He's a -3. I did mention a couple of names in our previous show that I thought had to step up. I mentioned Quentin Byfield and Trevor Moore. Byfield, I think, has done a good job. 4 assists. He's a +5. Moore so far really hasn't done much. He had 31 goals in the regular season to lead the team. He's got 1 goal in the series so far. And I think that second line for the Kings, that's a line that's been, when Victor Arvidsson returned, has pretty much been together the entire time, while a lot of the other lines there have been some tinkering with. And so that's been a line that they've kind of relied on. And in fact, Philip Deneau, Victor Arvidsson, and Trevor Moore have not been the factor that they've needed to be so far in this series. And I know a lot of people thought maybe Pierre Dubois was going to be an X factor in this one. He has certainly not been. 1 goal in 18 penalty minutes, and he's on the 4th line. He was on the 4th line for game 4, and it looks like he's going to be on the 4th line again for game number 5. I honestly didn't expect much out of him. I know that there was hope for Kings fans that he could kind of resurrect his awful start as a King in the regular season and come on in the playoffs and kind of rewrite the narrative for him. But unfortunately, that has not happened to this point. So what do we expect in game 5 and possibly beyond? We'll talk about that next here on this crossover edition of Locked On LA Kings and Locked On Oilers.
All right, game off. We got to pause here to talk more about Monopoly Go. I know what you're saying. Penalty, delay of game. You already talked about that, but there's just so much good stuff in this game. In Monopoly Go, you can build up with friends for timed tournaments where you work together to build up each other's boards. The more you win together, the more awesome prizes you unlock, and there's so much to get. Unique stickers you can trade with friends to complete albums for big prizes, cool new playing pieces to travel the boards with, hilarious emojis for taunting your friends when you smash their buildings or heist their vaults. Plus, Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. A ton include their own unique mini games like digging for treasure or a robot pachinko machine, and there's always new timed events that help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything you win or rent frenzies. There's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go. Get off the bench, go download it now, free on Google Play or the Apple App Store. Game on.
Well, the LA Kings face the Edmonton Oilers Wednesday, 7 p.m. Pacific time. Catch every moment of the hometown broadcast of your LA Kings and the Edmonton Oilers on SiriusXM on the SXM app. So wrapping up our look at the LA Kings Edmonton Oilers series so far here with this crossover special. I'm Eddie Garcia, host of Locked On LA Kings, and he is Nick Zararas, the host of Locked On Oilers. Nick, you got any stats or anything that you would like to throw out so far as what we've seen from the Oilers that maybe help tell the story? I know the stats I'm certainly going to throw out, and I think you probably know what they are as well. But any stats that you wanted to share about the series at this point?
Going into yesterday's games, and I haven't had a chance to update my spreadsheet I've been tracking throughout the playoffs, but going into yesterday's games, the only team that was losing and now eliminated in their series that was winning the special teams goal differential was Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay, best power play in the league in the regular season. Makes sense. You would think a team that's that reliant on their power play would be able to maximize the opportunities they've had. But when you go and look at the other 7 playoff series, the teams that are winning on special teams, which is both penalty kill and power play together, so if you get shorthanded goals, I'm counting that in your tally, that is your series. Like I said before, the goals are 10-10 at 5-on-5 in the Oilers and Kings series. 8-0 on special teams. The Oilers have a shorty in there too. That is your difference. And that is not and that I think reflects what we were talking about, the idea that the Kings are not that far away from where the Oilers are in terms of talent and ability as a team. It's that the Kings are making little mistakes. They're taking the penalties. Game 3 got out of hand because of the double minor and the major and the hit to the head. And the Oilers scored 3 power play goals down the back half of that game. The scores of these games would not be so lopsided if you did not give one of the best power plays in the league this much opportunity. Some of that is, the game happens. You're going to take a hold, you're going to take a trip, but If you are going to try and mitigate the disparities you have with the team that's better than you, you got to play close to a perfect game. And the Kings have had moments. They played pretty close to a perfect game in game 4, and they didn't get rewarded for it. And then you would think in game 2, the game that's 6-5, you would think that would benefit the Oilers. But the Kings showed they can score if they have enough opportunities. And in there, you had a special teams, you had an opportunity for the Kings, and they weren't able to capitalize. If the Kings can find 1-2 power play goals in a game 5, that's how you prolong this series. You can't survive if the other team is killing you that badly at 5-on-4.
Yeah, there's no doubt. That's the story of this series. The Kings, it's feast or it's famine. It's not feast or famine. It's feast for the Oilers. I mean, 0-for-11 on the power play for the Kings. They've literally gotten nothing out of their power play, while the Oilers are 8-for-15, 53.3%, which is outrageous. And the thing that's the most frustrating for the Kings and their fans is that this was all emphasized from the start of the year. We said one of the ways that we have to get better, and if we specifically face the Oilers again, is the penalty kill. And it was worked on and it was emphasized. And during the regular season, it absolutely worked. They were 1 or 2 all year long on the penalty kill. And now it gets to the most important part, the playoffs, and it is completely not gotten the job done. So I can't even imagine. Think about this. You've worked on something all year. It's like studying for a test, right? All year long, you've studied. You think you're ready, and then you get to the time where the test is there, and you just completely bomb it. So, we're going to talk a little bit real quick about what we think we see in Game 5. I'll say this: my dream scenario for the Kings is in Game 5, they score the first goal, because every team that has scored the first goal has gone on to win the game. And it's a power play goal. If that somehow will happen, that would be my dream start for the LA Kings, but I'm not holding my breath on that one. What do you think about game number 5 and possibly beyond? I know you picked the Oilers in 6 to start, and I picked the Kings in 7. That obviously isn't looking great right now, but what do you think about game number 5?
I think this is your kitchen sink game if you're the Kings. You've seen a couple teams come out with that effort. Tampa Bay was able to find a way to win their one game with as close to a complete effort as you can. Desperation is a great motivator, and it goes one of two ways. Either you storm out, you play with a ton of energy like the Kings did in game number 2. You heard Doughty talk about that after game 2, how satisfied they felt that they were able to answer what they felt was a subpar performance in game number 1, that the Kings know they can hang around and they are not this bad. You play with a little bit of desperation. You have a little bit of nobody believes in us, and the Kings can make this a game. I would not be surprised if the Kings win game 5 and we go back to LA for a game 6. I wouldn't be surprised in the slightest. The Kings are due for a little bit of bounces to go their way. I know in a short series, you don't always have enough time for the bounces to even out, but I wouldn't be surprised in the slightest. I think the Kings are due. That's not particularly satisfying if you're a Kings fan. You probably felt like you've been due for 3 straight seasons now for a bounce to go your way in a series that's been relatively close. But I think the Kings come out with their kitchen sink game. They do everything in their power. They get that power play goal they need. And this is a low scoring, muck it up, ugly game that nobody's particularly entertained watching, but is well suited for the Kings to find a way to win. And I think the Oilers do wrap it up in 6.
Well, I hope you're right as far as the series continuing. I know the Oilers do not want to come back to Los Angeles. They want to wrap this thing up. The crowd is going to be wild. It's been great so far in Edmonton as far as the loud, raucous crowds there. I kind of think the Kings had their kitchen sink game in game number 4, but we'll see if they can obviously duplicate that effort. They got a great chance to extend this series. I don't know if you know offhand if the Oilers have any time in their recent history lost a series when up 3-1.
The Duck series, I believe. The Duck series, McDavid's second season, I believe they were up 3-1 in that series against the Ducks. And the Getzlaf Perry Ducks came storming back, and they won that series in 7 games, if I remember correctly.
Well, obviously being up 3-1 is a great barometer for moving on to the next round. But we have seen 4 of the last 5 years in the first round, there has been a team that has come back from 3-1. We saw it with Florida and Boston last year. And the Kings were the last team in the NHL to come back from 3-0 to win a playoff series, which it did in 2014 against the Sharks. Andrei Kopitar, Drew Doughty, Trevor Lewis were on that team, so they can say firsthand, guys, This isn't over one game at a time. Just win game 5 and we'll see what happens. I did want to ask you as we wrap it up, Nick, is there anything that you've learned about the LA Kings having seen them these 4 games so far in the playoffs?
I think Byfield's going to be really good. Yeah. Not just a top 6 guy, like a genuine 70, 80 point all-star every now and then, depending on the format, where if like only one guy goes, then that's not a great barometer, but he's going to be a guy in this league for a long time. The dynamic ability in his skating and his playmaking is there. If you watch the games, you see a player who processes the game faster than pretty much anyone else on the ice.
Yeah, we obviously are very excited about the future for Quinton Byfield as well. I think, like I said, the only thing for me with the Oilers, really surprised about that penalty kill. It's a lot better than I thought it was, and I think it definitely deserves its credit for what the Kings have not been able to do on the power play. And I'll just reiterate something as I close out the show. We talked about in our first meeting, in our first preview episode, what's on the line for the LA Kings in this. They lose this series. I think that general manager Rob Blake is gone. That would obviously mean there'd be a head coaching change as well, maybe even bigger changes in the organization. We'll have to see, but it's more than just losing another playoff series in the first round. I think that this will have repercussions within the organization if this, in fact, does not go the way of the Kings, which certainly is going to be an uphill climb at this point. Nick, as always, great having you on. Appreciate your insights on this. It's been an interesting 4 games so far. I wish it was 2-2 and it was a best of 3, and maybe we even see a game 7, because game 7s in sports are amazing, but we'll see how it goes. Game number 5 will be obviously a crucial game. Oilers looking to move on, Kings looking to stay alive. Nick, thanks for all your insight. It's been great to talk to you and do these episodes with you.
If there's a game 7, we will do a 3rd episode. I promise.
All right. Sounds good. And that's going to do it for this crossover edition of Locked on LA Kings and Locked on Oilers. Again, thanks to Nick Zararis for joining me. And thank you for watching and listening this special crossover episode of Locked on Oilers and Locked on Kings, part of the Locked on Podcast Network. Your team every day. Have a great rest of your day and enjoy the Stanley Cup playoffs.